Welcome to Discover Dorico for April 2021. This is a live session, so if you're watching live, feel free to comment in the live chat section below. Live chat section over there. If you're watching this after the session, you'll find some useful time-based links in the description below the video so you can jump to specific sections. And you can email me at any time on discoverdorico@steinberg.de, discoverdorico, all one word, at steinberg.de. My name's John. These Discover sessions aren't necessarily linked together. Last month's session was on the Dorico condensing feature, and then there's Bees and Wasps for Eddie Izzard fans, or am I showing my age? Anyway, by which I mean there's no direct link to today's session. Today we'll be looking at how to set up microtonality in Dorico. We're going to start with the options that exist in Dorico by default and how they relate to diagrams like this one. There you go. This one's from Wikipedia, and I'll show you then kind of how this relates to Dorico, how to set up a new tonality system in Dorico, and we'll look at some of the options and resources available on the internet and how you can share tonality systems that you or other people create. So let's get started. I'll be reading the comments as we go, so if you have any comments then let me know and I'll read those as we go. If you can all hear me clearly, then let's get started. So in this diagram you can see behind me, you'll see various tunings. This one, like I said, it's from Wikipedia. There's the full URL there if you want to find this one. And what we kind of want to know is, so how does this relate? So I know you probably understand probably more than this than I do, but so how this relates to Dorico. So in the middle here of this diagram, well, sort of in the middle, there's a line here, slightly different shaded colour, which is 12 tone. So 12 tone equal temperament, TET. And it's the standard you'll be aware of course, also known as 12 EDO. So in Dorico it will show up as 12 EDO, or equal divisions of the octave, and it's a standard piano keyboard. So this first shaded area here, if this was C, then this one here is C sharp, and here where it starts being shaded is then D, and D sharp or E flat, and E, and it goes up from there. F would be here. And this shows you kind of how other things would be related to that. So in 12 EDO, or 12 tone equal temperament in Dorico, of course, you'll have this. You can probably hear Dorico as well. So as I just press the arrow keys, yeah, it's fairly standard. Okay, so that's, we all know how that one works. So in 24 EDO, so 24 is here in this diagram here. You'll see that where you would normally get, if C was here, C sharp and D. By the time you've got to D here, you can see that there's other options here. So C sharp is still here, but D, it would be here, and there's two others in the middle. So these are quarter tones. So in Dorico, if you were to write that out, one way of doing it would be this. So as I just press the right arrow to move on. There we go. Oh. Yes, depending on how you want to display things. And of course, with all of these, you've then got enharmonic equivalents of them. Well, in this case, you have. So for this normal kind of 12 tone scale here, you can use Alt-Shift and the up and down arrows. So Alt or Option, I guess, depending on your keyboard, and Shift, and you can move chromatically. If you do that on this scale here, you can take any of these notes and you can do exactly the same shortcut. And you can see the shortcut there on the screen as it's coming up. So just I guess for kind of complete clarity, all I'm doing is on my keyboard here is Alt Shift and the arrows up and down. I'm moving those. Oh, I've moved on to a lyric. Hang on a second. There we go. So Alt Shift and the arrows. So you can then move around those. If you've got this panel open, then you'll also see the accidentals down here. So as they move, as you're choosing them, then various options will highlight as necessary. So 12 and 24 EDO ship in Dorico by default, and let's have a quick look at how these are set up, and then we can look at how to create a new one. So over here on the top right hand side here, you can see we've got 12 EDO, which actually is normally set, and you probably ignored it previously, but that one's normally set. If you press the little pencil tool here, then we can edit that. So you can see that the way Dorico has it set up is it says divisions per octave, 12, as you'd expect, 12 semitones. So between A and B and B and C and C and D, you can see how many there are. So between B and C, there's only one. You get B and then you get C. But between A and B, you have A and then A sharp or B flat and then B. So the answer is 2. And between C and D, you have C, C sharp and then D. So the answer is 2. And then for each of those divisions, you can then define accidentals for those. So you have a natural here, and then you have a flat and a sharp, for example. And the flat says -1 of the 12 divisions. So if you're on a, as you'd expect, you're on a natural, and if you go -1 note, -1 semitone in this case, then you get a flat. So if I click on the little pencil tool for that flat, then you can see it's called flat. It uses this symbol, and the pitch delta is what's set to -1. So if I have a look at the 24 EDO, so here we are in 24 EDO now, and I click the pencil tool, then in Dorico here we've got the natural here, and we have flat here, but flat is -2, because if we take, well, I've ruined that one now, haven't I? Ruined that one completely. If you take this E here, for example, and you go down 2 to get to flat, because so when you create this one, when this one has already been created in Dorico, the pitch delta is -2, and the number of divisions has doubled for all of these. So there are 4 divisions between A and B, and 2 divisions between B and C. I said you can also do, so if you select a note, let's say this one here, and you can also use Alt or Option with, I normally say plus or minus, to do enharmonic changes. It's actually displayed on the keyboard as, let me show you here, on my British English keyboard. I guess it's the same in an American style keyboards. Can I get that in the right place on the camera? Just about, yeah. So it's got a plus, it's actually an equals, and there's a minus here. So these are the 2 keys I'm using. If you're using a keyboard in a different language, or your system is in a different language, in the key commands section in here, if you have a quick look for respell, so if we search for respell, then you can find respell using note name above and respell using note name below, and that's actually what you could set a shortcut to. So you can see that that's the option symbol and what you would need to change those to. So if they don't work on your keyboard or you want to map them to something else that makes more sense, then you can. And where there is an enharmonic equivalent, then you can use those keys to switch to them. It's actually more difficult at the moment to switch exact shortcuts to all of these accidentals. So, let's enter a few, and we'll have a look at how those kind of things will work. So, if there's no questions, let me have a look. No, there's no questions. Hello, everybody who's joined. So what I'm going to do now is kind of set up a different one. So if you're using Dorico and you want to have a play along, great. Well, let's set up a new tonality system and how it actually works right from the beginning. So if we just start a new project, so Command N or Control N if you're on a PC, I'll add a solo player. I just want a single staff for this, so let's just add a flute and go to write mode. And then in the panel over here on the right hand side, you'll see you will have 12 and 24 EDO by default. You can click on the little plus and you can make your own new tonality system. So I'm up here on the right hand side and I'm going to click on this plus button. So now I can give this tonality system a name, so I'm going to call it 19. And actually for 19, if you want to set one up, instead of thinking, so how do all of these work? Actually just increase all of them by 1. So there we go, like that, like that, like that. So we've got 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, and that will give us 19 divisions per octave. And this is, there's another way of doing this, which I'll show you in a minute. But to start off with, let's do a 19 this way. So now, if you want to make some accidentals to make for these, there's a piece I'll show you in a second, and what they needed for that one, if I click on New Accidental, I'm going to call this one Sharp. And you have here the accidentals you can choose. So I'm going to leave this as a standard for now. So I'm going to use our Bravura font by standard, so you can follow along with this at home. And this is quite commonly what you would be doing. And then you've got the it's showing the range in that font, and you can choose different kind of range, just areas of the font basically, and there's all sorts of different options you can choose here, which also include some other accidental options. So if you wanted some some different accidentals, then they already exist in the font, and you can add those if you want to. In this particular case, I'm just going to go for standard standard accidentals 12 EDO, and actually if you need them, I think our standard 24 EDO ones use these Gould quarter tone arrow ones, but I'm just going to use our standard accidentals because I just want a standard sharp looking symbol at the moment. I'm going to press the add glyph button, and that's going to add my sharp symbol, and then I'm going to tell it that the pitch delta is 1. So in this case, in 19 EDO, the sharp is going to go up by one of the divisions over here. It's called a pitch delta, but basically it's exactly the same as these divisions per octave here. So there's 3 divisions between A and B. When you add a sharp, it'll just go up. It'll increment that by, it'll just add 1 to that. So I've got a sharp, and if you want to do the same but kind of opposite for a flat, then I'll add a flat, and that will be -1. If you're doing things like, let's just have a quick look. So now I've got a sharp and a flat, and I've got that one set. So now I have over here on the top right hand side 19. Just for a quick look, in the standard 12, this is where you can see your flat is normally -1, and a double flat is -2. So in this case 2 semitones, and a triple flat is 3 semitones, and a sharp is 1, and a double sharp is 2 semitones up, etc., etc. In 24 EDO, of course, everything's basically doubled. So the flat is -2 because it goes past quarter and then goes to effectively half, isn't it? So the flat is -2, and then there's 3 quarter tone flats that you can use, and double flats you can use, and triple flats. So you can define them all, and they're defined in exactly the same way. So a triple flat here is -6, and all of the sharps also exist here. So a quarter tone sharp is 1, and the sharp symbol is 2, and a 3 quarter tone sharp is 3. So that's how you can define them to match the divisions per octave that you have set up here on the right hand side. So now I want to use my 19, and the common problem you'll have is that you'll choose 19 and then you'll click on a rest or a note and it'll switch back to 12 over here, and you'll say, but hang on, I chose 19. So what you have to do is choose where you want this to apply from first, and that's partly because you might be using different tonalities during the piece. So you need to know from this point on, what are we going to use? And by default, it's going to jump back to 12. So you click where you want to start first, which is in my case the first rest, and then you choose 19, and then you have to tell Dorico, this is where we're doing it from. So you have to tell it there's a key, basically. There's a key change at this point. So you do Shift K for key signature, and you can just type atonal if you don't want an actual key signature in. We'll look at key signatures in a minute. But if you don't want an actual key signature, you can type atonal. And now effectively Dorico from this point on, until you tell it otherwise, is locked now to 19. So if I now input a note here, you can use your standard octave shortcuts for moving these around. So now I've got one note in here, and I suppose if I turn that off for a second, I can use my Alt-Shift up arrow. And let's say we want to write out a scale for this, so let's kind of semi-cheat. We'll just use R to repeat, and then we'll press Alt-Shift up arrow to get the next tone in this scale, so R. And just moving them all up one as we go. Although doing this while talking is basically impossible for a brain like mine. Did I do that right? Anyway, so there's nothing else you need to do. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. So there's nothing else you need to do playback-wise. All you're doing is setting up the tonality system, and Dorico will play it back correctly. Now, this is based on the standard Dorico defaults. So I've started just using a flute as an instrument. It could be piano, it could be anything you like. I've made a new tonality system. By default, Dorico is in play mode is using our Hallion player. So if I just click the little E here, all it's done is loaded a standard flute. There's nothing, changed. But because our Halion player uses VST3 and it uses VST Note Expression, then that's how it's playing the notes correctly. I don't have to add any extra MIDI commands or anything else. It will play those notes correctly. It will also play them correctly if there's a chord, because with VST Note Expression, each note will bend individually. It's not like a MIDI pitch wheel where it's going to bend all of the notes on that MIDI channel at the time. Each note will bend independently. So there's nothing else you need to do. If you add the correct accidental to the note, Dorico will then play it back correctly. It will also do this if you want to use NotePerformer. Also, PianoTeq will also work with this playback system. So anything that uses VST Note Expression will work. And if you're not sure, have I set it up right or not? If you, of course, if you go to the play menu and you choose playback template, if you just reload the standard template, which is HSE plus HSSO, so the Halion Symphonic Orchestra is HSSO, if you reload that template, then it will work. The other thing to note is that actually all of this setup side of things, you do need Dorico Pro to set this kind of stuff up. So to access and create the new tonality systems, you need Dorico Pro. However, if you create a piece in Dorico Pro and then open it in Dorico Elements or Dorico SE, the free version, then it will play back fine. You can't add new tonality systems and that kind of thing in Elements or SE, but you can play them back and you can use that same file should you want to. So if you want to create a piece and then send it to somebody, they could be using Dorico SE, the free version, to play back your piece. There's a couple of questions. Let me just have a look. At the moment, I'll just answer questions if they're exactly relevant to this exact topic, just for speed. Can you change intonations on the fly? Have we just? I see. If you want to change like tonality systems, you can. I mean, the previous one I'd done. Let me have a look. This one. Basically, like I said, it's effectively setting a new. I'd set a tonal. So this one is 12 EDO, and then at any point you can just set a new one. So you just set a new key signature. So to do that, if you are in a piece and you've written a few notes, and then you want to carry on, if you then choose a different one, say I want to go to 24 at this point, as long as you say Shift K atonal again to set a new option, a new effectively key signature, new key tonal system at this point, then now it's in 24 for in this point. So now I can enter notes here, which is in 24, which means I've got 3 quarter tones, sharps and flats. And if I just arrow back, you see here it switches to 19, and then from this note on is 24. So does that? Thanks, Rob. A quarter tone late. Yes, I think I was too today. So does that work? Hopefully that'll answer your question. And when you set does 19 does that automatically apply to all instruments? Yes. Let's look at a couple of examples, because that will also throw up a couple of other things I think that will come up from this. So let me just show you. So I was sent a piece by a couple of pieces actually by David McDonald. Thank you, because I do like having a proper example to then show you how it's created in Dorico. So this is by a gentleman called Robert Hasegawa, and it's in his performance notes. This particular piece says it uses a 19-tone equal temperament scale. That's what we've just done, what we just created, and divided between the two pianos, each of which has 12 of the 19 pitch classes. So they just made it. What they were trying to do here is say, instead of retuning one piano for all 19 notes, it was easier just to take 2 pianos and detune each one slightly, because there were less changes on each piano. It was probably quicker, and probably quicker to retune them later. So piano 1, the top staff, will have these pitches. It has all the sharp pitches, and piano 2 has all the flat pitches. And they tell you in cents what those are. I'll come on to that in a minute. But basically, the pianos do share some notes. So the C, D, F, G, A, they share those notes. They're the same on both pianos. But the other ones, the top piano has the sharp notes, the bottom piano has the flat notes. Overall, basically, you need 19 notes. You need 19 pitches, so it will be 19. So what I've done with this one is define these in Dorico. So I will just bring up that file for a second. Oh, I've left colours on. That's interesting. Well, now we can tell which pictures are the same, I guess, but that wasn't my intention. So let me just turn those off. So in our notes section here, I've chosen figure notes. I don't know why I did that. Oh yes, I was comparing earlier. So here is the piece. So I've defined 19 exactly the same as I have before. I'll show you in the tonality system here. I've defined, I forgot to label the new accidental. It says new accidental, but it should be flat. And sharp, we've got 19 set up exactly the same as before. I wrote out a scale, make sure everything's working. You can change some of these, if you want to. And then this piece, then you can then write. So we've got two pianos here. This piano has all the sharp notes, and this one has all the flat notes. So. And I've left this on the Dorico defaults, so it's using our standard piano, I guess. I haven't even checked. Yeah, so it's loaded two pianos. Oh yes, I must have done the original stuff on a flute, so I got a flute as well. So it's using our standard two pianos, and then playing the pitches accordingly. And when you've got chord, then both notes, as I said, they will both bend the right way if necessary, because Dorico's taking each individual note and doing the appropriate options for those. So I wrote out a bit of this as an example to make sure things were working and things were working correctly. There was a couple of things actually with this kind of piece, actually, if you're notating this, that I also wanted to mention. One is that in our notation options, so Command-Shift-N or Control-Shift-N if you're on a PC, you'll probably want to choose the Modernist rule. I mean, it depends on the piece, of course, but the Modernist rule, where the accidentals then only apply to the note they're on, and they're modified by the key signature, but you don't necessarily need to show these kind of options and necessarily naturals like Second Viennese School or Common Practice. So you might want to choose the Modernist option to get some of those accidentals to then show up correctly depending on how you're displaying it. The other option was something, yes, in our layout options. So if you go to layout options, so Command-Shift-L or Control-Shift-L, and then in the note spacing section, there's an option for optical spacing for beams between staves. Now normally this is on for parts, but in this particular case, because I've written the two pianos in the score, but I want the beaming to be correct more like it would in the part. Normally it's not turned on because it can make a big mess if in a score of many instruments. Then, but what it does is basically more correctly space the stems and the beams. So if you turn this off, then let me just apply that. Let me find you a particular example. So I think, for example, here, these beams here, if I then turn that one back on again, then you'll get more even spacing between these beams. So for this type of piece, when I'm using effectively the full score for that, you might want to turn that on in the layout options if you're doing this type of piece. I just thought it was worth mentioning. I then looked at another example that David also sent me, which is coming up somewhere here. Here we go. Oh, in fact, before I do that, let me show you this one, which is, I also looked at this same piece, setting it up slightly differently, because in this one, they had written in the performance notes the cents. So if you, my basic knowledge on this, basically they've taken, if C to D is 100 a cent normally, so in our diagram, where's my diagram from earlier? You see at the top of this, here we go, they've labelled cents. So between here, so here's 12 EDO, so this is C and C sharp. Between C and C sharp, they're saying divide it up into 100. And then C sharp to D, or divide that up into 100. And it means you get a much finer control over what you're doing. So if you don't want just to be 0, kind of 1 and 2 and 3, but you need to kind of get in the middle of that, because in Dorico you also you can only use whole numbers. You might want a bigger ruler. You might want a finer amount of control on it. So what I also looked at doing is you could, if you wanted to, define the octave into normally it would be probably 1200, because if each note was 100 and there are 12 notes, it would be 1200. But you can't use decimal points. So to get very fine control, stick a naught on the end, move your decimal point. So this one's now 12,000. So in this particular piece, and I'll show you the numbers as a comparison. So we've got cents down here. So for example, the C to D is 189. So there's 189, but I needed a bit more control, so I've got 1894 for the decimal point. And then when you've got a smaller interval, so for example, when you've just got B to C and that kind of thing, or E to F, then it's 126. You can see here, so for example, C to D flat is 126, 126.3. Can't do decimals, 126.3. So now this total adds up to the divisions per octave of 12,000. Now the difference, of course, then is your accidental needs to not just be -1, it needs to be minus 63, effectively, with a decimal added, 63.1631. So but you can set it up this way, which means you can get very, very fine control, if you want it, over exactly how sharp or flat any of these are. And for some of the tonality systems, you may need that. And I'll show you another case where it's set up that way as well. So that was kind of, if you wanted to do things and kind of think in sense, or that's the way the piece has been described, then you can do that should you want to. And if that's just gone over your head, do the simple version first, understand that, and then move on after that. So another piece I then wanted to look at was Easley Blackwood's 19 Notes, another 19 tet piece. And in this one, again, I've kind of copied out from the beginning of the fact, have I got the original here somewhere? I don't know, maybe not. So these two are enharmonically the same. So you can see all of the notes you've got here, and then when you actually come to write the piece, now this one originally, I think they're just for numbered staves, and I think the idea was to play it effectively on synthesizers, because you had to have it on, using a standard instrument probably doesn't make sense. But I thought, what happens if we use standard instruments and get Dorico, effectively the playback, just to retune those, because then you can have it sounding a bit more like an orchestra if you wanted it to. So I'm not sure that these instruments are necessarily correct with the ranges that are defined in the piece, and I've only done an example, and just the numbers so far, this is kind of a work in progress. The numbers are so that I can reference the correct numbers in the original file that I was sent, because each instrument just has a number. So I've defined some of them as strings, I've defined some of them as clarinets, and some of them as flutes. So if you play this one back, let's go, I don't need that, let's go from this flow, shall we? Oh, actually this one also is playing back, I think, with NotePerformer. Yes, so here's, NotePerformer can also play back these tonality systems should you want to. So let's play this bit. No accidentals in that bit, not many. Got clarinets now, why not? So there's an example. Now, I don't know if this is sacrilegious. I'm sorry if Easley Blackwood didn't intend this, but I thought it was an interesting, example, and shows you maybe some of the things you could potentially do with it. Also in this one, and I noticed there's a question about key signatures in the comments. So key signatures in Dorico in general can be applied to one instrument if you want to. So at any point in one instrument, if you start the caret line and you do Shift K and choose, for example, D, capital D for D major, and press Alt or Option, Alt Enter, then it will enter that key just for that one instrument. So if you've defined different tonality systems and you want to apply a different one just for one instrument, you can do that. What you would do, if I just remove that, you would choose, say I want to go from here, so I've got this selected, and you would choose a tonality system, and then you just enter a new atonal point from that point with your tonality system chosen. And then it would apply a different tonality just for that one. I did start a quick mock-up of a Harry Parched piece, which was for saxophone, double bass, and keys. And the double bass is playing in standard 12 EDO, and the saxophone's playing in 43, I think. The piano is in 43. I can't remember. Anyway, so you can do that, and you can have different instruments in different tonalities if you want to. Also, in this piece, what I thought was useful to show you is this looks like E, but you can't. If you just put Dorico and say, I want to use E at this point, it'll go, oh, but that's can't because it's in 12 EDO. So how do you make a key signature that would also work for this? So let's have a quick look at key signatures. So you see here, it's not saying the key signature I'm using, it has a custom key signature that we've made. So again, in your tonality system, so click the little pencil tool, as well as the accidentals defined here for this piece, there's also a custom key signature. So I've pressed plus, I'm going to edit mine this time, but I did press plus, and then I called it E for my own sake, so that I know what it is. And then you can add sharps and flats into here. So at the bottom down here, you have all the accidentals that you have defined. So these are the list of accidentals that you defined in the other dialog. And then you can press the Add Accidental to Key Signature button. It doesn't always look like a button, but it is a button, like that. And then you can choose the order, so where do you want it to sit in relation to all of the others. And you can choose the note, so you can move it up and down to choose where you want it to sit, and you can change the octave potentially, or delete things. So you can add and remove sharps, flats, and you can do combinations of anything you like, and create then a custom key signature for that. So that's what I've done here, and I've then applied that. So if I remove this key signature here, then Dorico is going to start writing all of the sharps for this piece here. But with the custom key signature in here, I've just pressed undo, then it doesn't need to display all those extra sharps as well, because Dorico knows what to do with those. So I just thought if you're doing something and you need key signatures, then that'll be what you need to do. I'm guessing the Plain Sound Music Edition comments, I'm guessing that's from Mark. So I'll be coming on to one of your things in a minute, so that's good. Thank you for joining. And yeah, I think that we're okay on questions so far. So a couple of other examples. While we're talking about key signatures, one here, here's a musicxml file. Let me just open this in Dorico. And this one, when it opens, ta-da, is for oud and is a Turkish scale. So this is a musicxml file I've opened. So I've not done anything else in Dorico for it. And this one has a custom key signature and also a custom scale. So here we can see it says tonality system, and I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry. If somebody can tell me, that would be fantastic. And you can see this one says divisions per octave 53. So they've got very different divisions here. And then the accidentals, again, they've also got some different accidentals here, depending on exactly what they need for this piece, and they're all labelled and shown accordingly. And then when you're using this tonality system, whether you have a note selected or not, you can see the accidentals down here, so you can click on and choose those. Should you want to choose any of these or use any of these, then you can do. So this piece will also, of course, it will also play back. I mean, we don't have an oud. We don't have an oud, so it's using the guitar in Hallian. If you have an instrument that is also the correct sound and it uses VST Note Expression, then you could also set this to play back, of course, using that particular instrument. The a couple of other things I wanted to show you was that when you have one of these set up, because it might take you a while to create some of these, there's also these other two buttons, which is import and export tonality systems. So if you've created a tonality system, you can then share that with other people if you wanted to, or just if you've created it in one file, you don't have to kind of delete all the flows out of it to reuse that file. You can, if you want to, export the tonality system and then import it into another Dorico project. Maybe you started something not realizing you needed a tonality system and you want to import one and then use it in that project. Then that's what you can use here. You can just use the export option and then use the import option here. So I've shown a piece before which was done by Jude Thomas, where he set up, he says, slowing down, here we go. So Dorico, in this case, has got a different tonality system just for this piece. So if we have a look at that one, this was also defined, and I've showed this before in a previous session. So again, it's to get very fine control over the notes. There's potentially a lot of divisions you can have between each note. And then all of the accidentals are shown here as well. So there's a lot of accidentals. So this is a lot of work if you wanted to have to set this up again. So if you want to use this one, this is using the Helmholtz Ellis Just Intonation, then you would only want to create this once. You could then export it and then import it into a new piece, so that then when you start a new file in Dorico, or maybe one of the ones I'd done earlier, maybe I should have used that, but anyway. So we'll start a new piece for piano, or I'll mistype that and I'll actually this time write piano. So by default in Dorico over here on the right hand side, you will just have 12 and 24 EDO. You can then say you've got your buttons over here, so you can say import. I've already exported this somewhere, so I've exported it as a file. I will import this file. So now I have this one. So I can now say from here, choose the new tonality system, then Shift K, a tonal. Now I have the new tonality system, and now I have an awful lot more accidentals I can use. There was a question earlier about other instruments as well. So if you, for example, if you're writing for a B-flat clarinet, normally the B-flat clarinet would, you would write a pitch with an accidental, and when you get into the transposed pitch, Dorico would know what that is. What you'll find at the moment is that Dorico is going to try and find the next closest one. So if we go back to which piece was it? This one, 19 notes, where I had some other instruments. So for example, when the clarinet first comes in, I think here, this is in concert pitch. If I switch to the part, then you'll see it's showing me as a C sharp. When I'm on this note here and I switch, then it looks like it's not transposed. So what Dorico is going to do is basically, if we in 12 EDO, if you take a note for an instrument and then you transpose it, it's going to say, for example, I was a C, I'm now a D, and then I'm going to look for the correct accidental. The problem is that if in your new tonality system you don't have an appropriate accidental or a close enough one, Dorico is just going to go for the next closest one that it can find. So it's going to transpose the note, then look for the accidental that's the closest to what it thinks it should use and use that one. Not necessarily correct. So there's a potential that you need to define everything not only for the concert pitch key you're in, but also for the instrument you're transposing to. I'm not going to go into too much detail at the moment. If you're starting to do this kind of thing, you'll probably start to understand the complication of it. Maybe there's another session we should do on this kind of thing at some point. But for transposing instruments, there is that potential that you could get into that kind of situation. Or you can define an awful lot of accidentals here. The other situation you might have is if you are Jacob Collier, give us a ring. No, if you, for example, you're working in a key and you always want the fourth to be sharper. What we're defining here and what we've defined so far is effectively, let's say we're in C, we've defined that what the accidentals are. So maybe in C the fourth is sharper, but that doesn't mean it is when you're in G or in E flat. So it's not always making the fourth sharp by the same amount. To do that, you would also have to define some extra accidentals. And I'm not clever enough to know, but I'm guessing that's why there are so many accidentals in this one here. And actually, if you ask Mark Sabat on the chat at the moment, then he might be able to actually tell you more about that. In fact, let's have a look at one of his options as well. If you have a look around on Tinternet, you will find plainsound.org. In fact, don't look for it, just go to plainsound.org. And if you're on here, they have a Just Intonation and Microtonal Resources section. If you click on this option here, then it will give you some tools here. And there's all sorts of useful tools for things here. One of which is, it says here, there's the Helmholtz Ellis Just Intonation 2 fonts for pitch notation, and there's a zip file you can download. So if you download that zip file, here's one I downloaded earlier, then you will get a folder that looks like this, which has a bunch of things in it, which includes some fonts, and because they're not necessarily using the standard fonts that we would include with Dorico, the Dorico fonts for bravura for these accidentals. So you will need to look, and I mean there's some text fonts you can use as well if you want them, and you will want the fonts, and to install these fonts you will also, there's a Dorico folder, great, which has the JSON file, and it does say see readme. If you read the readme file, it will tell you why, it will tell you where to put it, so install that or it's not going to work. It will tell you where to put it, and then you can have a look in a couple of these Dorico files that they've got, which have some of these tunings in. So if we double click on this and load this file, here we go. In fact, I'm not sure I've installed the fonts. Apologies, Mark, if that's the case. So now there are some examples in here, and some, they've already defined a load of these options, so you can have a look at these great examples. But also, if you have a look in the tonality system option up here, then you also see the tonality system is here. So if you wanted to, you could then export that to use it in another project. You will need to use the same fonts. I'll show you why. So in here, when we have these fonts defined, for example, here we have a tempered double flag. If I edit that one, then this is, you see there's a little line across the top of the double flat here. It's not using our standard fonts. So once you've installed the fonts that are also in that folder, and you've got the range options here, you'll have a new font here, which, so we've got the new fonts. And you then got, well, you can look at all sorts of options in here, but you can then have a look at, here are some of the other different accidentals that you might need depending on the tonality system and everything else you're using, but these are predefined in this file. So if you want to use this font, you can export it, but you'll need to also be using that same music font in another project. Or if all of that is, I just want to get started, take this file from Mark, in setup mode, delete the flow, add a new flow, and you're fine, because then everything's already set up and in this file. So the other accidentals are defined in here already. You can see this is a different set of accidentals that are defined in here. And there was another file in that folder as well. So here's the Harry Parch scale 43 EDO. Here we go. So let's have a look in here. Because this one will also have various other options. So there's some other tonalities that are also been defined in here if you want to have a look at some of those. And there are examples of various tuning systems in this file as well. So a lot of work has been put into this. So if this kind of thing is definitely of interest, then make sure you go to plainsound.org and download the this option here, the fonts here, the zip archive, and I'll put a link to this this page underneath this video as well. So it won't be there right now if you're watching live, but after this session I'll put a link to that so that you can go and find those as well if you want to. So let me. Oh yes, and Mark just mentioned there may be some bugs if you're importing and exporting tonality systems with custom fonts. Yes. So what you might want to do at the moment at least is open one of these files that already have them defined, and like I said, in setup mode, it's gone. Here we go. In setup mode, delete the flows that are already here when you finish with them. Create your own flow. Use this file maybe as your template to start off with, because I think when you're using custom fonts like Mark is here, then these import and export options may not import and export all of things exactly that you need for those fonts as well. If you are interested in doing it with the standard fonts and you want that the other one I showed, then for now drop me an email, discover.dorico@steinberg.de, because I can send you at least the Helmholtz Ellis that's got the 12,000 divisions and all of the accidentals defined. I could send you the tonality system for that one from Jude Thomas. And maybe there's a resource repository somewhere we could put these online, maybe on our resources page. Let's see. But for now, if you need to, email me and I can put you in touch with the right people or send you the right files for those. Right, so let me just have a look and see what we've got over here in the comments. Bear with me a second. And is there anything I've missed? I think we're okay. I've ignored the fact that these sessions were originally half an hour when we first started. They're just going to be useful information instead of a time limit. So let's have a look at the comments. Yes, if you want that font, the HEJI font, then you can get that from Plain Sound. But a lot of those do exist in the Dorico font as well. So it depends how you want to, which ones you want to use, how you want to use them. There's questions about other things. We'll come back to those in a minute. So on topic, the VST sound being used for this microtone. The VST sound is the defaults in Dorico. I've not changed any of the sounds, or you don't have to add anything for the playback to work. Dorico is linking what you're setting up in the tonality system for those sharps and flats using VST Note Expression. It just does that automatically in the background, as long as the samples use VST Note Expression. And the ones you get supplied with Dorico by default do that. And as I said, so does NotePerformer, so does other things like PianoTeq, and there may be others that I haven't tried as well. So there's nothing else that you need to do for that. Yes, NotePerformer, yes. Right, there's a couple of other questions as well, so kind of recapping on other things. When are you going to release Dorico 4? Not today. Are you going to improve VSL cooperation? Possibly. VSL themselves have done the playback templates for that, so have a look at, if you go to dorico.com/resources, then on that page there's also some VSL playback templates, so you can have a look at those ones, and they did some new ones recently as well. And as to, are we implementing Cubase functions? No idea at this point, sorry. There was a question about large scores on Windows, I think. If you're having problems with things taking a long time, we'd probably quite like to know about it. So, is it Junas? I'm not sure. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Send us a score. You can get in touch with the Dorico team on the email address. For me, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, or even better, if you want to get in touch with our developers, if you go to the forum, dorico.com/forum, if you can post a file there or get in touch, you can write a comment on there and get in touch with somebody there, then we can certainly have a look if there's a problem with that. Any questions on this topic? Not so far. So thank you to the people who suggested this this particular topic to look at today. I hope this has been really useful. Let me know what you'd like to see in the next Discover Dorico session. I'll stay online a little bit in case there's any other questions in the comments over there. And in the meantime, stay safe, as everybody says at the moment. I'll see you next month for whatever our session is going to be then. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.